This is a Mini Moog Model D. It's produced from 1969 to 1981. This one is, I think, roughly 1975. It's been copied, cloned, and emulated dozens of times since its production run ended, but the original Minis are still prized. This is the new Moog Sub 37, released in 2015, and it's the current flagship of Moog synthesizer line. Like the ancestral Mini Moog, it's got 3 oscillators and the characteristic Moog low-pass filter. Unlike its forebear, it's cheaper and a lot lighter. I think it's like 30 pounds. The question of does it sound as good as a Mini Moog is kind of subjective, and I'm sure it will be argued about on the internet by guys with full beards and a lot of free time. You can argue that since this is 1960s vintage technology, the various weirdnesses and instabilities of the components give it a charm you can't replicate. At the same time, many of these charming instabilities also give it a lack of consistency and a frustrating tendency to drift out of tune, which are issues the Sub 37 doesn't really have to contend with. So how do they compare? Well, if you look at the oscillators, both the Mini Moog and the Sub 37 have 3 voltage-controlled oscillators. On the Mini, oscillator 3 also works as a low-frequency oscillator for modulating pitch or filter cutoff. Since the Sub 37 has its own pair of LFOs, the third oscillator on this thing is a dedicated sub-oscillator, which is handy for making really deep sounds. Both have the same basic wave shape: triangle, sawtooth, and pulse. Now, the Mini Moog breaks this into 6 discrete settings with 3 different pulse widths and a shark fin that sits halfway between a triangle and a sawtooth. The Sub 37, on the other hand, makes the wave shapes continuously sweepable, so you can morph from a triangle to a sawtooth to a pulse and back, which opens up some really interesting possibilities. That's just one oscillator. That sawtooth to square wave transition is pretty neat. If you compare the two on an oscilloscope, which is totally something I would do, the Sub 37 and the Mini are very, very similar. The pulse waves are nearly identical, complete with this slight slope that you get on the pulse crest, and the triangle waves have the same kind of curvy ramps. The sawtooth waves are slightly different, though, at least comparing this particular Mini Moog to the Sub 37. The sawtooth is phase inverted on this one, so it's a saw up instead of the Mini Moog saw down. That shouldn't make any difference, except you probably won't have to hit that phase button on your mixer if you're mixing with other stuff. But now the heart of both synthesizers is the filter section. The Model D has a 4-pole, 24 decibel per octave diode ladder filter that's just freaking legendary. It's capable of sweeping between these really deep, rumbling, low sounds and these howling, screechy noises, which has kind of defined the Moog sound for decades. Show you what that sounds like here. Filter also self-oscillates, so you can make noise without anything going into it. The Sub 37 has the same kind of filters, but adds some new features. In addition to the 24 decibel per octave filter, it can be switched to a 6, a 12, or an 18, which give you some flexibility. You can hear they're pretty similar. There are some minor differences, but they're close, and I'm driving oscillator 1 pretty hard right now, so it's breaking up a little bit. When the Mini was first introduced, some clever people figured out that you could expand the thing by routing the output into the external input, and then you could get this overdrive and feedback effect from the filter section. Now, the designers at Moog have learned this lesson and integrated it directly into the Sub 37. So not only can you drive the oscillators really hard just by turning them up, which is what I was doing before, they're built with really high gain. There's a feedback control on the mixer section, and then this thing called multi-drive, which is 2 separate stages of overdrive and distortion before the filter, which is really fantastic for like dirtying up a sound. It's kind of badass. You can hear how it kind of breaks up in sort of a gritty sort of way. But where the Sub 37 really excels is in its modulation. You've got these 2 main envelopes for filter and amplitude, but there are also 2 dedicated low frequency oscillators, a digital noise generator, and all these things can be routed to modulate any one of 93 different parameters on the synthesizer. 93. That's a lot. And then beyond that, there's a 16-step sequencer that can be routed the same way. Now, I can't think of too many analog synths in recent memory that allow that kind of flexibility that aren't modulars. A few other handy features of this beast. It's got a built-in arpeggiator, full MIDI implementation, which is really nice. It's got USB, and then there's software for the Mac or PC for editing the patches. And in addition, there's a duo mode, which means it can actually play 2 notes at a time. Check that out. So these 2 Moogs share a lot of heritage, and they share a lot of common features. They don't sound exactly the same, of course, but Mini Moog has a certain je ne sais quoi, a certain charm about it that defines vintage synthesizer. And the Sub 37 has more of a modern sound to it. It kind of evokes the classic Mini Moog sound, but it doesn't copy it. It's also got a boatload of new sound sculpting features. It's a lot easier to buy, and it weighs about 25 pounds less.